Click the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to never miss another update.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Quran Time with Hamia, where we explore the Quran and the interesting stories inside this marvelous book. Part 12 of the Holy Quran covers Surah Hud and the start of Surah Yusuf. Surah Hud explains the greatness of the Quran. The Quran is a complete book in terms of its verses, meanings, and subjects, and it cannot be changed in any way. There is no contradiction or mistakes in it. The main reason for its greatness is that this book has come from Allah, who is both wise and knowledgeable. Allah challenged the deniers of the Quran to make 10 verses which are similar to the ones in the Quran, but they were unable to do so. This part covers the oneness of Allah as well. Allah is a sustainer of all creatures, whether they be human beings or demons, animals or birds, fish living in the water, or insects crawling on the earth. Allah has created the heavens and the earth, and He is the only creator. Surah Hud also mentions the importance of the prophets and includes stories about them. It mentions the story of Prophet Hud, and the surah is named after him. A long time ago, a great tribe lived in the south of Arabia. They were called Ad. They were very clever and could do many things. They used the mountains for their homes. They carved out great mansions with wonderful pillars. They called their city Aram. It was very famous. As time went on, the people of Ad thought more about themselves and less about Allah. They thought they didn't need Allah because they had lots of money and power. They thought they were being clever, but really they were foolish. Before long, they turned to bad ways. Gangs of them used to rob and kill people traveling by. There was still one good man among them. His name was Hud. He did not belong to any of the gangs. He did not agree with the things they did. He tried to tell them to stop their bad ways and told them to follow Allah's ways. Hud said Allah would punish the bad ones, but most of the people still would not listen. They thought they were more clever than the messenger of Allah. Allah told Prophet Hud to take all the good people into a big cave near the city. The very next day, a terrible tornado came, and only the good ones, the ones who had listened, were saved. The surah also mentions a story about Prophet Ibrahim. The first wife of Prophet Ibrahim was Hazrat Sarah. Hazrat Sarah was upset that she could not give any children to Prophet Ibrahim. One day, Prophet Ibrahim was sitting outside his tent. 3 angels ascended to the earth. They came in human shapes and saluted Prophet Ibrahim. Prophet Ibrahim arose and welcomed them. He took them inside his tent, thinking they were strangers and guests. He invited his guests to eat and placed before them a sumptuous meal of roasted calf. There were angels that did not eat. The angels gave Hazrat Sarah glad tidings of the birth of a son, Ishaq. She could hardly believe the news. As an old woman, the news seemed too good to be true. And thus Hazrat Sarah and Prophet Ibrahim were blessed with the miraculous birth of Prophet Ishaq in their old age. His son became Prophet Yaqub, and then many other prophets came from his lineage. There are many lessons and advice in these incidents. These incidents also became the source of consolation and steadfastness for the Holy Prophet and sincere believers. Allah also explains what will happen on the Day of Judgment. There will be 2 types of human beings: people with good deeds and people with bad deeds. Those who die in disbelief will live in hell forever. There will be a terrible punishment for the people with bad deeds as long as Allah wills. For the people with good deeds, Allah has placed innumerable blessings in paradise forever. The virtues of the Ahlulbayt were also mentioned in these verses. Allah mentions that the Holy Quran is the miracle of the Holy Prophet. Allah has also sent a witness, which according to multiple ahadith is Imam Ali, the talking Quran. For Allah, one's eligibility is not based on kinship or family. That is why the son of Prophet Nuh was denied his eligibility. The successor needs to be worthy of the title based on his deeds and behavior and not who his father is. And with that, Surah Hud ends and Surah Yusuf begins. Surah Yusuf is about Prophet Yusuf's life and is thus named after him. Prophet Yaqub had 12 sons. Yusuf was the most beautiful of them all. Once Prophet Yusuf had a dream. He told his dear father that 11 stars and a moon and a sun are prostrating to me. His father forbade him not to tell this dream to his brothers. Prophet Yusuf's brothers became jealous because of the love between him and their father. The brothers asked their father to take him with them, and then took Prophet Yusuf to the forest and threw him into a well. A caravan passed by. They threw a bucket into the well to take out some water, and Prophet Yusuf came out from the well through the bucket. The caravan took him to Egypt and sold him as a slave. An Egyptian governor bought him and kept him in his house. The governor's wife, Zulaykha, fell in love with Prophet Yusuf because of his tremendous beauty and tried to seduce him, but he refused. Zulaykha then blamed Prophet Yusuf and claimed that he was the one who tried to attack her. Then the governor ordered to put Prophet Yusuf in prison. Even in prison, he continued to preach Allah's message, which is why the prisoners respected him. On the same day that Prophet Yusuf was put into prison, 2 other men were also imprisoned. One used to serve the king wine, while the other was a royal cook. Both men had been accused of trying to poison the king. On the following day, the wine server said to Prophet Yusuf, "I saw in a dream that I was crushing grapes to make wine for the king." The cook said, "I dreamt that I was carrying some bread in a basket on my head and birds were pecking at the bread." He said, "Oh, my prison mates, the man who dreamt that he was crushing grapes will soon be released from here and will go back to his previous post. The second one, who carried the bread on his head in the dream, will be executed and the birds will start to eat his brain." Prophet Yusuf thought of getting himself released from prison through the wine server and told him to remind the king of his innocence when he saw him. The dreams of both men came true just as he had foretold. One of the captives was released while the other was hanged. Unfortunately, the wine server forgot all that Prophet Yusuf had told him to convey to the king. The king was very concerned about the meaning of his dream, and even though his wise men thought over it seriously, they could not make sense of it. The king's dream became a means of the liberation of Prophet Yusuf from prison. As soon as the wine server heard about the dream, he was reminded of his time in prison and remembered the powers of his cellmate. He also remembered that Prophet Yusuf had asked him to tell the king of his innocence. He approached the king and got his permission to see Prophet Yusuf. Prophet Yusuf interpreted the dream by the power given to him by Allah. He said for 7 years the crops will yield abundant food for the people of Egypt. After that there will be a famine for 7 years, during which all the food lying in the storehouses will be finished and the people will starve. Therefore, the people should try to grow as much extra grain as possible so that it would stand them in good stead during the time of famine. On hearing this very reasonable and sensible interpretation of his dream from the wine server, the king was delighted. He ordered that Prophet Yusuf be brought before him so he could make good use of his wisdom in solving his problems. Although he had been in the dark dungeon for so long, Prophet Yusuf refused to leave the prison until he proved his innocence. He said to the courtiers, "I will not come out of the prison until the king makes inquiries about my case. Tell the king to ask the wives of the noble women about the time when they cut their fingers on seeing me." The courtiers passed on this message to the king, who called the concerned women to him for an explanation. They all confessed the truth, and Zulaykha, the wife of the Aziz, also testified that Prophet Yusuf was innocent of any guilt. Thus, Prophet Yusuf was released from the prison with his dignity and honor restored. When the king met Prophet Yusuf, he found him to be a wise and broad-minded man. In response to the request of Prophet Yusuf, as related in the West above, the king made him in charge of finance and food and ordered his ministers and officials to treat Prophet Yusuf's commands as his own. Prophet Yusuf thus became the Aziz of Egypt and began his new duties without delay. He was determined that when the famine arrived, nobody should starve. During the first 7 years, he supplied grain to the people according to their minimum needs and stored the rest in the newly built granaries. By the time the 7 years were over, the granaries were full. The water level of the Nile fell tremendously and the country was hit by a severe drought. However, due to his foresight and planning, the country did not face a shortage of food. The famine also extended to the lands of Palestine and Canaan, where Prophet Yaqub lived with his sons. One day he called them and said, "My sons, we are in great distress due to the famine. You may go to the Aziz of Egypt, whose reputation as a kind and just person has spread everywhere in the country. Leave Binyamin with me for company so that I may not be lonely." As commanded by their father, the brothers of Prophet Yusuf set off for Egypt to purchase grain and bring it back to Canaan. When his brothers arrived in Egypt, Prophet Yusuf was very pleased to see them. They did not recognize him at all, never expecting that he was alive. Prophet Yusuf was disappointed in not seeing his full brother Binyamin and asked his brothers to tell him about themselves. They introduced themselves and told him about their father and mother. Prophet Yusuf was relieved to hear that Prophet Yaqub was alive, and he welcomed his brothers sincerely. He provided them with enough wheat for their needs and had their money put back in their bags secretly. He also asked them to bring their brother next time as proof that they were speaking the truth about their family. On their return home, the brothers related their experiences to their father, praising the generosity and hospitality of Prophet Yusuf. When they opened their bags, they were delighted to see that their money had been returned. Soon, they were out of grain and were impatient to go back to Egypt to get more. However, they could not go back without Binyamin, so they tried to convince their father to let him come with them. Prophet Yaqub refused to let them take Binyamin, saying that they would do the same thing with him as they did with Prophet Yusuf. After repeated promises, the brothers finally convinced him that they would sincerely look after Binyamin, so he let him accompany them to Egypt. When they reached Egypt, the brothers proceeded to the court of Prophet Yusuf and presented their brother Binyamin to him. Prophet Yusuf was extremely happy to see his younger brother and invited all of them to dine with him. Later, he gave them all accommodation at his own house and asked Binyamin to sleep at his room. During the night, Prophet Yusuf revealed his identity to Binyamin. He explained how he had been raised from a lowly slave to a position of great power by the grace of Allah. However, he asked Binyamin not to tell their brothers anything of their conversation. After they had received the requirement of wheat, the brothers of Prophet Yusuf began to prepare for their journey home. Meanwhile, according to the command of Allah, Prophet Yusuf put into action a plan to detain his full brother Binyamin. He ordered his men to put a gold cup belonging to the king in Binyamin's baggage. The brother of Prophet Yusuf had not gone very far when they were stopped and accused of stealing. They denied this and said that if any one of them was found guilty of theft, he could be held as a slave by Prophet Yusuf. The caravan was searched, and the cup was found in the bag of Binyamin. When the brothers were brought before Prophet Yusuf, he said, "According to your own words, we will now detain Binyamin with us." They replied, "O Aziz of Egypt, our father is old and weak. You may detain any of us, but not Binyamin." However, Prophet Yusuf said that he could not detain anyone who was not guilty. The brothers had no choice but to leave for Canaan. The eldest brother, Yehuda, refused to return without Binyamin. He remained behind in Egypt rather than face his father. When the brothers returned to Canaan and told Prophet Yaqub what had happened, he was heartbroken. He had already lost his eyesight crying for his beloved son, Prophet Yusuf, and the second loss was almost too much for him to bear. He now recalled the memory of his lost sons and wept. He asked his sons to immediately return to Egypt to look for both Prophet Yusuf and Binyamin. According to their father's instructions, the brothers came to the Aziz of Egypt for the third time and pleaded for the release of Binyamin as well as some grain for food. Prophet Yusuf reminded them of how badly they had treated their brother Yusuf and caused separation between him and his father. The brothers were amazed to hear this secret from the Aziz, who now spoke in the language of the people of Canaan. They asked him, "Are you Yusuf?" He replied, "Yes, I am Yusuf, and this is my brother." Allah has been gracious to me. One who is pious and patient against hardships is always rewarded by Allah for his virtues." On hearing this, the brothers hung their heads in shame and asked him for his forgiveness. He said, "You need not be frightened of me. Allah may forgive you your sins. Now take my shirt and cover my father's face with it, so that he may regain his lost sight. Then return to me with all your family." After getting his eyesight back and hearing the good news of his son, Prophet Yaqub decided to proceed to Egypt immediately. Prophet Yusuf was delighted to meet them and embraced his father and mother. As a token of their gratitude to Allah at this reunion, his parents and brothers prostrated themselves on the ground. Thus Allah made true the dream of Prophet Yusuf when he had seen 11 stars and the sun and the moon in prostration in front of him. After many trials, Allah raised him from the position of a slave to the highest rank in the land. At the request of his son, Prophet Yaqub settled in Egypt with his family, and their clan became known as the Bani Israel.